Hi, my name is Katie Peak. I'm going to be attending a district professional development for reading and writing. I will be observing the curriculum writers as they present new information and they discuss past writing samples that we did in class and that we have submitted to them. We're going to be looking at them and comparing them to a rubric and looking for what exceeds the standards and what meets the standards.
I know. When you're just waiting for that phone call that said, oh, you don't have to do staff development today. I kept waiting, but it didn't happen. Anyway, we're so glad that you were with us today, and we're having technological difficulties. Imagine that. It must be a Monday. And so but we have a hard copy. Yay. So Jim's going to read you off the norms right now.
It's okay, we can't see them. Okay, so our norms today, we will be honest and share what we think and feel. We're going to look at some reading responses later from the author study. So just really being honest with, do you think that these are good responses, what meets, what exceeds, and being honest with your feedback. Participate in the conversation, focus on our task, think creatively and comprehensively, treat one another as equals, listen when others speak, and bring humor to the table, since we're all here together anyway. Our learning targets for today are to examine the district's reading responses. So first we're going to look at the rubric together and really think about what meets, what exceeds, and what needs revision. Analyze the author study responses. Choose some district exemplars, and we're going to be writing commentary, about 4 to 6 sentences on why we think it met or why we think it exceeds. So we have these going into the author study next year. Identify areas to improve instruction in order to get more in-depth responses. So how can we present this differently next year to get more from our students? And then the afternoon we'll be planning for instruction for the next 2 weeks.
So what we're going to ask you guys to do first is we're going to pass out a copy of the rubric that we've all seen and used to grade all of our responses. And we just want to have a quick conversation with the people at our table. What is the difference between needs revision, meets, and exceeds expectations? That way we have a very clear understanding as a group and we can kind of correct any misconceptions or answer any questions that anybody has. We'll probably do about maybe 10 minutes to share and talk at your table about what the difference is between each part of the rubric, and then we'll kind of have some time to share. And this will help prepare us for our next activity that we're going to do with the rubric.
I think that how when I'm grading, if it was really hard to get a I mean, if you weren't really those words, but I wonder, pretty much like needs revision is they pretty much don't do anything. Yeah. But then meets is kind of like, to me, like, it's not specific, there's no specific text evidence to the opinion. It's just kind of broad.
Yeah, I find a lot of my students, like right in this area, miss some of those points right there.
I think that like they struggle with their opinion doesn't support their text evidence doesn't support their
they just try to find something that they think will work, but not.
Or sometimes mine will have one opinion, but then they'll throw in some other ones with it. They don't just stick to one thing. And so that's where it states a specific opinion. You know, they don't always just stick to that one.
Or like 3 different opinions or 3.
Yes. Yeah, sometimes they'll say their opinion, but then they'll start to talk about the book and almost like a retell. Instead of just using a piece of text evidence to support that opinion, it becomes or that retell piece.
Yeah.
And then the recommendation, I recommend this book too.
Yeah.
And then know why.
Yes, yes.
How many of your Abraham Lincoln books?
Like probably 95% of them.
Yeah.
And I taught several of them just taking what you wrote and rewriting. Like just
I know, that's so hard. You're supposed to model, but
they use
your work.
Yes.
Do y'all have any guides?
I do. Thoughts on legs.
So I struggle with, what do you leave of the Elmo? Do you leave the rubric? Or do you leave the example?
I've used that book, that Empowering Writers expository book, a lot for examples. And I'm trying to give them several different examples because they do. They'll take one and they'll like look the conclusion, like that wrap up sentence. They'll like take that same one, but then just change a couple words to make it fit theirs. And I'm like, okay, that's what was given in the example. So I've found that if I give several different examples of those expository papers in that book, then they do better. But like with the reading response, it's so hard because we don't have a whole lot of those examples other than the one that we model, you know, and then they just do from what you say.
Which they could provide more.
And I think that's what they were talking about, is that they're going to give us more like district examples of other students, which would be great because then we can
Some more of that.
we do more of those exemplars to show the kids other than just what we do. So I think that'll
Well, and I feel
be
like they take a lot more out of it if it's a third grader that
Yes.
has done it.
good. Yes. Yeah.
Well, so we're going to be talking about the author study. Did you feel like there was too much? Did like, because we were finding we had a hard time for them, like whenever they would go to work, there wasn't a lot of time for it because our mini lessons were.
Yes, we had to make our writing lessons a lot smaller to be able to fit in the author study lessons. Like the author study lessons took over the whole LA block mostly.
I think it should be one genre.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, that time they should be able to implement a lot, more fluidly.
How long are we supposed to do? 10 minutes?
Kind of share out a few. We're going to share out a few things that we noticed. So if we can get a table or two to comment on what they saw between these revisions, meets, and exceeds, that'd be great.
Before we do that, can we talk about the rubric? I really think that this rubric is way too broad. I mean, a kid could turn in a blank sheet of paper and get a 60. And because the whole district is grading with this rubric, it's way too subjective. I mean, we need to, like for instance, the conventions, most, some, we need to narrow that down. Even my CIT and my principal at our school, because I use this as our SBD, and when she came along, she was like, this one goes with it, but so does this one. It was like, it was way too broad. And I have when we've got kids that are struggling, and we're in that SST thing, and they make a 60, and then they can go ahead and correct it, now they're making a B. It's not showing their true, I don't know. So I'm wondering, is there room for revising the rubric?
I mean, yeah, I don't.
I don't know what everybody else
We
thinks.
did not write the rubric, but
Yeah, of course not,
I don't know if we have.
We can definitely pass
We
that
can
on.
definitely pass that on.
Yes.
I know that. And I knew it wasn't coming from you, but it was, I mean, even when the exceeds, writes an opinion or about a character or an event. I mean, it's too broad. It could be an opinion about anything. It wasn't an opinion about their character development. you know, I think the character's great, and that would have worked, because that was an opinion. So I'm just, you know, if we really want, I think my readers' responses from the kids for Alan Say were horrible. And I really think it was because the rubric didn't guide them properly. It didn't get meat from them.
And I don't know if you guys encountered this, but I had students either pick the little boy, because it began, you know, I was a little boy in first grade in the school along the hill. Then one of them wanted to talk about the actual bicycle man. Then another one wrote about the principal. But they had great responses, but then it was like, well, which character? And then it came to debate, which character? And then I kind of felt like, yes, it was kind of vague in some areas. So then I'm like,
Exactly, but it still matched the rubric, so that was my whole point.
I mean, to me, if we want to change the rubric to be more specific, we would have to have really specific lesson plans up to that point that we were all following. Because we've had it where our lesson plans are slightly different from what the rubric were, just because of our interpretation of what the lesson plans online were. So, I mean, to make this more specific, we would have to make the task 100 times more specific leading up to it.
Well, and I think to bounce off of that, the actual post-assessment prompt was not very specific.
No.
So when you pair that, I feel like this rubric, if tweaked a little bit, could be really effective if the prompt was more specific and you had a very specific outline of what you expected kids to do. For example, you need to tell what you think about the bicycle man, give 3 character traits,
Exactly.
and 1 piece of text evidence for each character trait.
Right.
And that way, if the kids have those expectations,
Right.
then they see, when I did it, that's what I made them do. Because I was like, I can't get enough out of this post-assessment, and that way it fit the rubric. So I feel like mine turned out okay because I was really specific in what I wanted from that post-assessment.
Right, but then I was making them do more than was even being graded.
Right.
So they were getting, the kids who weren't doing any of that still ended up making A's and B's.
Yeah.
And they shouldn't have.
Do you think the response would have been different if they would have chosen a different book
Yes.
other than the Bicycle Man?
Yes,
I do too,
absolutely.
because I know what we were supposed to write on, it's no longer in publication. Erica's saying, whatever, however you want to pronounce it. And so she chose the Bicycle Man. But I could think of other books that have his that would have been a lot better to do this rubric with than the Bicycle
Right.
Man.
My thought was too, is they should have been able to, because we looked at all the Alan Say books, they should have been able to choose the books
Okay.
that spoke
Maybe.
to them.
That's what it is.
But a lot of all those lessons from that Alan Say book, the majority of them they were like the first 30 days, too broad, not enough meat in them, not enough rigor of where we are trying to get our students to go. So I believe I spent 6 weeks on that Alan Say, just at the top, at the surface, instead of going down deep. I really, and you know, some of us probably did tweak it, but the majority of us who were following the scope and sequence didn't. And so our district, we need to look at that. And like he said, we need to have more specific plans for that so that everyone in the district is on the same page and doing that.
yeah, we're gonna jot all this down.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know, but did any of your kids, did they like Alan Say?
They are, no,
Yeah.
like, I went in with the attitude letting them know, I knew Grandfather's Journey, and that was about it. We used that text in another district I was
Yeah.
in. I said, guys, I'm learning with you. They ended up loving it. We did a standard score over it. They really got into it,
Well,
so.
the texts themselves are very high quality, they're interesting to the students, you know, there's a lot of meat there, whereas it depends on who you pick for your author study, but these books had deep.
I would say it did really, they
And
can
the
dig
more
deep.
reference.
And we pulled in another text, Baseball Saved Us, that was from the same time period from a different author, and they got to see like both aspects of it. Like that was Japan, and then it was from the America's point of view. They really liked it.
That's good to hear, because, I mean, we were talking at the table, and both our campuses, the kids weren't interested at all. They didn't get that. I mean, and even though, I mean, not one of them, so maybe that's good. No.
Yeah, they were.
That is because
I would
if there's
over,
any kind of
okay,
unit,
this is our last one.
kids would,
Yeah, they eat it.
and yes, whether it's an author or like a country that they're learning about, you know, any unit.
Yeah, I wish we could go into like the theme,
Yeah.
you know, like way back when
Yes.
we were kids,
Yes,
like when they did
the themed units,
they buy
yes,
into
they do, they do.
Anyone else?
And if you show them that you like it, yeah, yeah.
Anyone? Yes.
We missed what was said. What was good to know, we just missed the comment.
I was glad to know that other schools liked them. Because we were talking here in both of our campuses, the kids had a really hard time understanding and getting into those books.
So it could have been shorter, a lot.
Well, we'll see. I mean, you know, it's the first year that we tried it as a district, and so we're not really sure kind of the feedback, if they're gonna change anything or not for this year, but those are really good things to hear, because we have all agreed on that too, and so it's nice to hear the feedback from everybody else, that there might be some pieces that we can tweak to make it even more stronger, even more beneficial for our students, especially the post-assessment.
We really feel like the author study was effective with our students, with their critical thinking. And the first go-round of responses that we did, and we sat down to compare, we really felt like our students grew in their thinking and just the extensive detail they gave in their response. It went from, you know, their weekly reading responses with a few sentences to a well-developed 3-paragraph opening body closing with adequate text evidence. We were very impressed. So
You know,
great job.
It said to write an opinion response. Well, my kids got kind of confused a little bit the first time that we wrote the response. So then we talked about it and all that, and then it got better.
We came up with a model response as a class, and they use that as a guide, and it just was great. So.
Yes.
So, to steer us kind of back to like get ready for our next activity, we need to kind of define as a group what the difference is between someone who meets expectations and exceeds expectations. And we know there's different categories for every single one, but maybe just an overall kind of what's the difference between those two. I mean, we know as educators, meets means they met and exceeds means they exceeded, but what does that mean between those two? Like, what's something we need to look for in a paper to know if it's meets or exceeds? In any category.
One place I think is where it talks about the text evidence, and a lot of times we've done, for instance, if you had one character trait, if you had 3 pieces of text evidence that made sense, that was probably exceeds. If you had 2 pieces, that would have been meets. Trying to get them to dig the stuff out of the text, and I think you need to quantify it a little bit more than just, and so we told them that up front, that you need this many.
Yeah, and mine would ask, hey, when you say text evidence, do you want me to quote the actual page number and quote it, or can I just make a reference to? So then we went through that discussion, and I think a big piece too is modeling. As you're working through the author study, what does it look like? Like you were saying, modeling with the kids and guiding them through.
Well, and bouncing off of that, like in the meets category, it says use multiple pieces of text evidence, but then it says that mostly support the opinion. So I know a lot of times 3rd graders have trouble finding relevant text evidence that matches, like I can pull a quote out of the book any day, you know, okay, this one works, but if it doesn't truly support their thinking, then that to me is where they would kind of fall short into the meets category. But that, to me, was the most important category. Obviously, it's worth almost some of the most points. And then the row below that, having those linking words, I mean, that just shows that students are able to connect their opinion again to that evidence. So really, I like that this rubric has a lot of points given to students who can link their opinions to the text evidence. I mean, 60 points of the rubric kind of is included in that way. So, I mean, if a kid is having trouble spelling, if a kid is having trouble, you know, with punctuation and capitalization, it only penalizes them a little bit, but what we're really looking for is that thinking piece of it. So that's something I kind of enjoyed about this rubric.
You had a comment.
No, I was just gonna say, when we had our kids double check their work before submitting their final copy, the keywords are like introduces, states, uses, and they exceed, so they, you know, must meet all those requirements, whereas meets, but the keywords are like some, may include, some of, consistently. I mean, it's just kind of like,
Right.
the kids are right there in the middle can fall in that category.
Right, so they're doing it some of the time versus they're doing it consistently.
Or
throughout
may or
their
may not
paper.
even include some of the things.
Exactly. So that definitely helps us to kind of come up with a definition between the two of them. It's consistent, they somewhat have a grasp of it, or they're not doing it either at all or just a tiny bit.
One thing that we both saw was that
some kids would just retell almost the entire story, and that to me is not really showing your deeper thinking, because you're not grabbing those like big important parts of the text. So that's, I think, somewhere where we could have improved on the rubric a little bit, or maybe, because I mean it does say states a specific opinion about a character and event, but we kind of tried to steer them away from, because you know, so much we're like, okay, get every detail from the story, and we thought they should be able to draw conclusions, like gather those bigger events and kind of make whole judgments about a character and all those types of things. So we kind of thought it was exceeds if they just retold every event, and like, I get that you understood the story, but I want for you to tell me, you know, your overall opinion of the character, or an overall character trait, or some, you know, so maybe if they were able to kind of pick out those larger themes instead of just every little detail. More
One of the things that I also, kind of what you said, that I liked that the rubric really did though too, was that having the introduction and the body and the conclusion, now that we're in these GBQs and these expository pieces, my kids are starting to see, oh, there's these same similar parts that all pieces of writing have. Now they may look different within the closing or within the opening of different types of writing, but one of the things that we had to talk about a lot was, does your introduction and your conclusion, does it match? Because sometimes they'd have this great introduction and all this evidence, and then their conclusion would be about something totally different. So I mean, making sure that, and we're seeing that again, but that they're getting better at it with these expository pieces. So really making sure, but I also know that with expository, we've been using that framework, which I think is that more specific piece that helps them plan out. So if there's some type of even organizer that I could use next year with my students to kind of help them with the framework.
Okay, so that kind of brings us to our next activity. So we're gonna come around and pass out just like a couple of random examples of readers' responses. And some of these are meets and some of these are exceeds according to different campuses that submitted them. And so your goal at your table is to one per person? Yeah, like 3 or 4 per table, I think. Your goal at your table is to read through all of them and sort them into a pile of meets and exceeds. And then we'll be sharing with another group in the room to kind of discuss that, and I'll give you another activity to do after that.
I know that sweet girl. That's in my class. I have her. Look at the handwriting difference.
That's what I was thinking.
So they said this one's
I think, well, I don't know if we're supposed to know that. I think they just wanted us to see meets and exceeds. I think that's what they said.
She was a meat. Do y'all want to look at one at a time? Is there more?
Yeah. Well, this one you said that they copy.
Everybody more than one so they can come to the same.
There's no text evidence. There's one opinion, and it's mainly a retail.
Yeah, I was gonna say. Didn't even have to read what it was to know what it was about.
But I feel like there's 2 in this category of meats.
Like it's kind of in between some of these because it doesn't
introduce a topic.
No.
It does say an opinion,
But no text evidence.
but no text evidence.
Because see this one, this meat says that it uses multiple pieces of text evidence, so that would
That
be
would
more
definitely
over
be
here.
I would
And there's
say
not.
maybe this would even be attempts to state an opinion.
Yeah, that would probably be more.
And even the use of words is
No,
not.
he doesn't connect reason.
So he's on those. So I would almost put.
not me.
Definitely
I don't
not.
think so either.
So it needs revision. That one right there.
Put her paragraphs. We worked very hard on that last year.
She's one of my favorites. No, you're not supposed to have them, but.
Is that a Faraday?
Yeah.
I love her.
Yeah, her dad was in my room on Friday. I love him. He's so funny.
They're a sweet family.
Oh, yeah. I mean, hers is also still kind of a retail.
Kind of, but in the beginning, she introduces
The book.
the book and who the character was.
And she's talking about
excited.
And saying happy, like saying they're happy.
She gives text evidence to support that. That matches. Scared. Wow, his face is as black as
They all use that quote in my class.
Mine did the same thing. They used that.
Like one of their biggest ones.
his hair's red as fire. So funny. Because they probably had never seen a redhead before.
Right.
Or them even
That we talked
referred
about
to
that.
like that.
And we had talked about that, about how, like, you know, when you go to another country, I mean, when you automatically think, people look different.
Yes.
Right? So that, I think, so that was one
Yeah.
thing we talked about. So I think that's one of the reasons kids
Connected to that.
I was gone for a week of this also. I forgot. I was on my honeymoon.
Oh, how fun. Yeah, I would definitely say she's neat.
I don't know what her opinion is here.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Right here, it seems like it's somewhat of the retail. Because she's got the beginning, the middle, the end. But a lot of kids struggled with that, turning it into a
Well,
retail.
even being, I think towards the beginning of the year,
Yeah.
they're still not, we haven't talked a lot about it, so
Yes.
we could have used.
And that's hard to use text evidence to support your opinion without going into the retail part. You know, that's hard. That's hard to, a hard concept for them.
Oh, in my opinion.
I understand.
I know this because
This would be
that's
exceeds, but it has, I would definitely,
yeah, there's a few, but they definitely use the words, multiple different text evidence.
Prove the specific
His opinion
introduce.
introduces the book and the author.
But I don't like how it doesn't have structure.
Yes. How's the closure on this one? That's because the book said. See, there's not a whole lot of closure either. You know, that ending statement. It just kind of stops.
But I guess if you're looking at, you know, I always look at the majority.
Yes,
So I
it
guess-
would be mostly exceeds, yeah.
And I think that's my hardest part about teaching, is teaching them that the response side of it without, like you're saying, like without
Yes.
the retail, like trying to get them to, I sometimes still struggle with it, but they know this
It's
is retail,
hard.
this is not.
Right.
I tell them though a little bit different, because I tell them that in the beginning they need to give like a 2-sentence brief summary of the book. This book is mainly about, and that kind of gets them out of
The retail. But then they can go back and use those specific text evidence. Yeah, that's a good way to do that. Yeah, they had a hard time keeping that opinion and just sticking to that. And that text evidence to support just their opinion.
Yeah, because most of mine did the retail part more than anything else. Like she was probably one of the few that had somewhat of an opinion, and it's all along
Look at the
with.
wedding ring. Yeah, remember? It's still on?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So Brad, I'm
Been
gonna start
like
freaking out.
2 months?
They said 6 to 8 weeks. It should be. Wow. Yeah, my 2 side stems of my ring was loose. I was at carpool one day, like, you know, watching the sun catch it still. And I was like, did that just move?
We just got married.
And it, like, the 2 side stems, I could, like, spin. It's like, yeah, Brad was not happy. He was like, I spent that much money on something.
Yes.
I hadn't even had it 6 months.
Oh. Well, congratulations.
It's been awesome. I felt really bad though. I was gone for 7 days from my classroom because I left 2 days before so I could, get wedding stuff going, and then a whole week after.
You were married before you started teaching, right?
After my first year of teaching.
Did you get married in the summer? See, I thought about doing it, but I love fall, and so I was like, we're gonna do it for fall.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that was the worst. It's just like it was so stressful.
Was it?
And I was doing a master's. It was just like
A lot. Yeah. I wonder what they're going to have us do with these papers, if they're going to let us keep some of those exceeds once we figure them out, like use them for next year. Yeah, as examples of what to.
Some of my work too.
I have.
I was thinking
Yes.
in my, I was going to keep my notebook and then keep like how we go, we have them save all their stuff in these folders.
Yeah.
Ask if like my high, like a high,
Yes.
and a low.
Yeah. I just think it helps them seeing the other students,
Well,
and several of those examples like we were talking about earlier.
And in the 4th grade rooms, they all have examples of like a 1, a 2, a 3, and
Yes,
4.
yes.
And they're all like last year students.
Yes.
And she said that they take that more than me modeling.
We could start doing that.
Remember we used to have that old rubric?
1 through 8.
Yes, what was that called?
Stages of.
Yes, but there were examples. Norma Jackson. But there were examples that they had provided, so the kids could look at those. It did. I mean, I wasn't a big fan of that whole process, but it was a lot. But the kids could actually connect to it and see the examples that went with each stage. And I think they have a better understanding, whereas if we're just trying to teach, and they could compare their work to the work that was posted for that board.
Start doing that with the star score, like 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yes.
Just because whenever I went to watch Datola, I went and watched her writing.
Yeah.
And they knew, it would just be good just to at least introduce them to
Yes.
it, and just so that they
Yes.
can, kind of like the line of progression.
Yes.
But in the writing sense, like,
Yes.
okay, or do you think you're, at what stage do you think
Where do
you're
you
at?
think you are?
Do that with
Okay, guys, we're just gonna jump back together really quick. Your next thing that we're gonna have you do is to meet with another table and share with them what pieces you had. Which ones did you feel were meet expectations, and which one did you feel were exceeds expectations, and why? And then as a group, you're going to pull from both of your tables one meets that you feel is a really strong example of the meets expectations on the rubric, and one exceeds that you think really fits that category straight down the line on the rubric as much as possible. So from both of your groups, one meets and one exceeds. And then I'll give you more instructions in a little bit. So let's have you two people meet together. You guys can meet together. Okay. You two can meet together. You want to meet together?
I know. I don't know if I should. You're fine.
Because the opinion was more about, there'd been some characters in the book, but it was so well organized, it was still strong if you took away the idea of the prompts. So we went ahead and chose it as exceeds. And have you ever seen soldiers at your school before? Well, in the book, The Bicycle Man, written by Alan Say, you'll be so surprised at what the soldiers do. But wait, there's more. American soldiers come to Japan just to do tricks on a bike for the children. The book called The Bicycle Man is mostly about kids being amazed by the soldiers. There are so many surprising and amazing parts in the book. I think the kids were pretty amazed at what the soldiers were doing on the bike. I think the kids weren't expecting the soldiers to do tricks on the bike. They also weren't expecting the two soldiers to even come. I also think that the children were scared that the two men came. I think all of that because I read a part of the book that said two strangers were leaning over the fence and watching us. The book had also said the war had been over for only a short while, not even 1 year. I felt afraid. So after all the tricks, and after being afraid, the two soldiers and all the children got along very well. And the principal gave the two men a gift. After that, the soldiers walked off to somewhere in the world. What I'm wondering now is why did the men do tricks for the children? Where did they go? But the number one question I'm willing to ask is, what was in that present? So, I mean,
That's really good.
But, I mean, because there's even a little bit of retail in there. But we went ahead and stepped out and thought, okay, we'll say exceeds. And basically, we thought that the piece exceeded expectations because the student introduces the book using the title and the author's name. And then she doesn't state an opinion, and I kind of went over that part already about, but we still chose it because she did do a clear opinion with the structure of her text being well organized. It also exceeds expectations because she uses multiple pieces of text evidence that clearly support her opinions. For example, what really stood out to us, I think all of that because I read a part of the book that said two strangers were leaning over the fence and watching us. She was supporting her opinion, the children were scared. And then she clearly connects her because and with her reasons, and she has a strong conclusion. We thought it was clever. So you could argue either way on that one. And then our meets, do you really want me to read it? You don't have to. Okay. All right, well, we thought this one was meets because although at the beginning there was some retail, here's where the student starts to get into, my opinion is the black guy is respectful because the bicycle learner received the gift with both hands and lifted it high above his head. And then he gives several examples from the text about why he thinks that the bicycle man is respectful. So this one could almost be exceeds as opposed to the other one. So we're really torn. And then our commentary, this piece meets the standard. The student includes the title in the introduction, does not include the author's name, so that kind of bumped it down. The student states an opinion about the character and provides two pieces of text evidence that mostly support their opinion. For example, the student states he is also respectful because he gave a large bow to the principal. The student provides closure by using a brief concluding statement. So, that's what we're thinking.
Anybody want to go next? Any volunteers?
Just don't dash up there at once.
Okay, we're gonna do like two more and then we'll take a little break.
These copies are colorful. Okay. This was our needs standard. This one was a little borderline meets expectations. When we scored it, it was an 88. By the meet standards, an 82 is meets and 100 is, so they're like right in the middle. It was a little hard for us to decide which is which. We said we didn't really write much. That's the quality commentary. The introduction tells the title and the author, so that would be exceeds. It does state an opinion. This one, we were a little confused. While they used text evidence and they did link it with the word because, on the rubric, we were a little puzzled where this would fall because on the text evidence, exceeds and meets both says uses multiple pieces, and then you come down here to needs revision and it says that there's no text evidence at all. Well, this person has one piece, but it's a really good piece of text evidence. So it's, okay, well, that technically one is not multiple, but it's also more than none. So we were wondering if there was a place where that could fall, because on the rubric that was a little tricky, because while they just used one, it was a really strong piece of evidence that they used. So that was kind of hard for us to figure out where this student fell on that. But they had a really good conclusion, strong closure, and so we kind of put them as a strong meets standard, just because of those couple of things. And then our exceeds, this person, they both have very strong organizational, they kind of look like maybe they were from the same campus. Maybe the teacher, the classroom had been really focusing on that organizational structure and how to begin your introduction and things like that.
The introduction does include the book, the author, the topic, has multiple pieces of text evidence that supports opinion, uses linking words to transition, like I said, multiple pieces this time, including conclusion. Didn't provide necessarily a strong sense of closure, but we knew they were done. So, it was there. And then the conventions and spelling, they were grade level appropriate, so we put this one as exceed. On this one, on conventions, we put it more on meets because like the author's name was not capitalized. There wasn't periods at the end of sentences. So those type of things, we feel like in third grade, they should know to do those things. Spelling wise was fine, third grade appropriate, mistakes and things like that. But authors' names and periods at the end, those should not necessarily be missing. So that's where they fell on meets for that. So there we go.
Today, during the professional development meeting, we started off by looking at a response to a literature rubric that is provided by the district. We discussed the rubric as small groups, and then we shared what we found with the whole group. There were a few teachers that found the rubric unfair and difficult to use. Those teachers presented their concerns to the curriculum writers, which are the presenters, and I think that the curriculum writers did a really good job at keeping their composure while addressing their concerns. And they also were able to explain that they will take their concerns back to the ELA coordinator and let her know what they didn't like about it. I think it was a difficult situation, but it was addressed very well. It was interesting to observe this type of situation because they're hard questions and they're concerns that those teachers had. And as a presenter, you're going to face challenges such as that, and you're going to have to you're going to have to answer their questions respectfully and make that teacher feel validated, but yet still explain why it is important. The majority of the teachers thought that the rubric was useful and helped the students to know what the expectations were. After we discussed the rubric, as small groups, we looked at 3 different types of writing samples that were written by third grade students this year. We compared them to the rubric, and then we rated them based on what we saw in the writing. Once we completed that, we were asked to write a brief summary on the back of the paper explaining what we found in comparison to the rubric, to help us make the decision whether the writing sample was met the standard or exceeds the standard. Our groups were then asked to share out what we found and why. So it was very informative to hear what some of the other groups said versus what our group said. And I think that it helped us to understand that we all are on the right track. And that the way that we're grading those papers, deciding on whether they're met or exceeds, is that we were where we needed to be. I thought this professional development was very helpful because it allowed several teachers to talk with each other on how they scored their students using the rubric, and then they could compare it to the other teachers. I think it's very helpful to bounce your ideas off of other colleagues to help them get a better grasp for what the expectations are. We were able to decide on which writing samples were met the standards and which ones were exceeds the standards. And next year we're going to be able to use these samples to help teach the students what the expectations are and what it needs to look like and sound like from other third graders. I think sometimes after teachers just modeling it over and over and over, they start to use just what the teacher has said or what the teacher sample looks like. However, if we have some of those other METs or exceeds papers from other third graders, they're going to be able to compare their own work to that. So I think this will definitely be able to help us next year. I think this meeting was handled very professionally. They were able to discuss with us what their concerns were, why we were doing this, and what the outcomes of the meeting were going to be. However, I think that next time they should have asked for some written feedback at the end of the meeting, because that would allow for some of those teachers that did have those concerns or questions to be able to address them and to write out what those concerns were so that the ELA coordinator or the curriculum writers could change that for next year. I think that it would also allow teachers to write down what they liked about the meeting, and it would give those presenters some feedback on how the meeting went. So, thanks.